Hello, and welcome to the third in our series of audio-enabled EDA STEP workshop sessions. My name is Annette, and I'm in full recovery from an eating disorder. Before we get started, there are a few caveats. This session of the EDA STEP workshop is being recorded. Please note that these audios will not be available on the EDA website until they've gone through the full vetting process. We will, however, be sending information to the recordings to the GSB email distribution list. If you're not currently on that list, please drop a line to info@eatingdisordersanonymous.org and we'll get you added. Listening to a recording is not a substitute for attending EDA meetings or working the steps. We encourage you to check out our meetings pages, which include face-to-face, online, and teleconference meetings. Just like what you might find in an EDA group, what you are about to hear reflects the experiences and opinions of individual EDA members. These may or may not tally with your own experience. Take what you can use and leave the rest. You do not need a sponsor to attend this workshop. We'll all be working the steps together, me included. To make things easier for everyone, we've muted everyone as they join. If you'd like to be heard, please unmute your phone using *6 or Alt-A if you're on a computer. You can mute and unmute using the same. There are so many of us. We won't all get a chance to introduce ourselves. However, if you're speaking, please do tell us your first name and where you're from. Last week, we discussed the broad-based support EDA has gotten from doctors, as well as other treatment and prevention professionals. We reviewed letters of support we received from respected authors in the field from a past long history of support for atheists and agnostics in 12-step organizations. We heard from Giselle about hope and some key ideas and practices that support recovery. I was happy to tell you that if I can walk free from my eating disorder, anybody can leave it behind. Nuria then shared some key changes in thinking and action needed to create a life solution. This week, Giselle and Nuria will review Chapter 5, How It Works, pages 110 through 117, and then we'll have a panel of EDA sponsors discuss the written portion of last week's homework. I'm going to mute everybody again because it sounds like we've got lots of people that are still busy in the background with things. It's like we've got lots of people that are still busy in the background with things. Hang on, I muted the wrong thing. There we go. Participants, here we go, once more. Muting all. Okay, so if you'd like to be heard, please don't forget to *6 or Alt-A. *6 or Alt-A. Thank you. So the two things that we really need to remember today are just that what you hear here and who you hear here is really an important part of building your own story. I really do think, and this is supported by evidence-based research, as we tell ourselves about our possibilities and opportunities, really shape how we perceive and are able to live out our lives. So as you're hearing these stories, think, yeah, that's me too. Or if there are differences, you know, it might not be you yet. But anyway, with that idea, I'd like to open the floor for Giselle and Nuria. Nuria, are you on the call?
Yeah. Hello?
Hi. Hi, Nuria.
Hi. Hi, it's Nuria. I've recovered from an eating disorder. I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. Thank you. Thank you. Is Giselle on the call?
She is. She's right here.
Hi, this is Giselle. I'm from Maricopa, and yeah, I'm here.
Go ahead, Nuria.
Okay, I'm on. All right, so we are going over, if I understand pages, hold on one second. 110 through 117 first on how it works. Just a few notes. Is that what we said?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, Annette had brought it all together at the end of last week's session of how this works. We worked through these steps because we ourselves can't make ourselves recover. And then something happens as a result. And we developed formation, some type of transformation, spiritual or non-spiritual, but something that motivates us to keep moving forward, I guess you could say. And how it works, you know, one thing that really always, I'm always reminded of when I'm working with others who are trying to work these steps is, on page 110, it does not insist on abstinence first, right? If I could abstain from acting out my behaviors, well, why even do all the work that I need to do? We recognize that recovery from an eating disorder is usually a gradual process. I want quick answers. I want quick recovery. I want this, I want it now. And I have to remember, like, this business of recovery is going to be gradual. It's not going to happen overnight. And then a couple of lines down, it says through continuous daily practice. This is a continuous thing. My eating disorder and my struggles and me trying to get it, quote, under control was continuous. It was daily. It was all the time. So instead of continuous, it was daily. It was all the time. So instead of focusing on all that, now I'm focusing on continuous daily practice of a solution, and the solution that I've learned through these steps. And on page 111, we're talking about how it works. Again, this is, Annette brought this up, but I'm going to try not to repeat what she said last week, but anyone can recover from this. I'm going to try not to repeat what she said last week, but anyone can recover from an eating disorder, though not everyone does. Unfortunately, I've had to experience some who, they don't want to work certain steps, or they don't want to participate in any type of meeting, or carry the message in whatever way the meeting, or carry the message in whatever way they can, or whatever it can be. It's like they want to do it only their way. They don't want to do all 12 steps, and or they think, okay, I'm good to go, and I don't need this. I want to go back to my eating disorder. Work. It's just, we got to continue working it. Okay. Anyway, so going on, it gets into step 1, which is really what we're going to be focusing on even more today. Step 1 is we admitted we were powerless over our eating disorders. This is on page 115. We really get into it, that our lives had become unmanageable. But before that, on pages 114 and 115, at the bottom, we could not solve despite our best efforts, our eating disorders, that we had serious problems, eating disorders that we could not solve despite our best efforts. I mean, I tried 100% to stop acting out in, all my behaviors. I would stop one behavior, another, always there. And I mean, I tried so hard, as many people do. And it seemed like no matter what I did, nothing worked. And, the next part, that no accessible human power had relieved our eating disorders. Again, I mean, I had tried all kinds of outside resources. I tried to depend on people. They couldn't make me better. And then the great thing is that the reliance on God, a higher power, or a higher purpose could and would restore us to sanity, set us free. And that's the purpose of the rest of the steps. It reiterates having insufficient power to overcome our eating disorders at the bottom of page 115 through 116. Where we considered taking this important first step had obviously failed, or we wouldn't have gotten to this juncture at all. Hello, I've tried everything at this point, or almost everything, right? So let me just try the steps. So the whole point of the 12 steps is to enable the person who takes them to find the power to recover. That's the purpose of the rest. The power to me is like the power with the capital P. It's like whatever works for you. I myself didn't have the power on my own, the way I was doing it, to get better, to recover from my eating disorder. So I'm going to work these 12 steps, since I can't do it on my own, and to, get connected to a power, something bigger than myself, that's going to actually get me to be able to recover from my eating disorder. And, as much as it stinks in the beginning to admit that defeat, admitting that defeat opens me up to be willing to try something else, because obviously my way hasn't worked. So let me just try to do what so many other people have done, and give it a shot. So that is my take on those pages. I hope that was quick enough.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. This is Giselle, and I guess the only thing I really wanted to add about the how it works is the first step, and the first little bit is all about building a foundation. We want to have a solid foundation, and not that we're going to do things perfectly, because we're not. Like she said, this is a slow process. This is a slow process, and we just do baby steps. But if we do a solid foundation, then we can handle just about anything. it's building trust with myself, it's building trust with others, and just having that stuff. I'm going to fall back into my behaviors, and I have to be able to pick myself up, and I have to start, putting tools in my toolbox and learning how to be honest. And that's one of the big things in how it works, is being honest, rigorously honest. And yeah, I just wanted to add that in.
Thank you, Giselle.
Great.
This
Thank
is Annette again. And a couple other ideas that were pretty foundational that I want to point out. And one is really this idea, and we're going to talk a lot more about this as we get into chapter 2, but the page 115 brings up this idea of mental blank spots. Okay, this 115 brings up this idea of mental blank spots. Okay, this is the same stuff that we talk about in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a condition that we recognize is actually fundamental to the situation of being stricken with what is really an eating disorder, or other conditions stricken with what is really an eating disorder, or other conditions that where we feel just the sense of like despair and helplessness, because it seems like no matter what rationally is going on in our heads, we find ourselves back in old behaviors without even thinking about it. What the heck is that? I mean, what kind of a misery? It's like that's where the insanity out. In step 2, we talk about, the power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. In step 1, what we're really doing is admitting to being frankly insane. And nobody wants to get there. It's not like anybody wakes up one day and decides, well, I'm going to be frankly insane. I just want to be a person with an eating disorder that I have no control over. And frankly, it doesn't always feel like we have no control over it. A lot of times it feels like we do have control over it. I mean, who better than somebody stricken with anorexia? I mean, honestly, that feels like a heck of a lot of control, but it tends to spiral into areas beyond which, we just can't seem to spiral into areas beyond which, we just can't seem to arrest the progress of like that sort of fixation, the obsession, the ways that we relate, and the way we turn up in our lives is we keep going back to behaviors that we know actually are damaging, because they do something for us. And we'll talk a lot more about that in the remaining steps. But I think it's really super important. Go ahead,
Annette, real quick, because those mental blank spots. One thing it always rang a bell is when like people talk about like autopilot. It was almost like I was on autopilot. It's like, or like I went all day or whatever days, and it's like, wait a minute, when did I eat? Like it was auto. It's not like it's not like I intentionally did these things, or it's like I was running a certain amount, and like before I know it, I'm like, whoa, how long have I been running? It's like this autopilot, like not even like thinking about it. That's the crazy part. It just happens sometimes. So.
Exactly. And that's a great example, Nuria. Thank you so much. And so one of the key reflections is just that nobody made a decision to like turn the corner into something that was irresponsible. Nobody makes a decision to act irresponsible. Nobody makes a decision to abdicate self-care. Not really. I mean, we're always starting off with the right intentions, generally. I mean, so it's not like we're somehow fundamentally bad in some novel way. But man, when by the time we get to the point where we're starting to seek solutions, oh my, a lot of us have tried a lot of different things. And it's not very different from, as we'll talk in chapter 2, it's not so terribly different from how people with other kinds of addictions, and I'm going to mention that word, even though addiction's model of recovery, we embrace actually really full recovery, which is kind of like they're different theoretical models. We're not going to get into that, but it can feel just like this inescapable pull to keep doing the wrong thing, and we know usually that it's the wrong thing. So a couple things, something that this book can help with, and there are 2 questions, and we actually wrote about them. If you use the STEP Workshop worksheets, you'll see that these are familiar questions because they show up on, I think, page 3. So do you use your eating disorder to help you manage your emotional states in one way or another so your life feels more manageable? Behaviors that cause harm. And the answer usually is yes to the first one, like, yeah, you do. Because, we use food, even normal people without eating disorders use food to kind of like smooth out the rough edges of life. They do. The perks, actually. It's comforting. There's a reason why they call it comfort food. And frankly, sometimes for people that don't do that have kind of other forms of eating disorders, it's comforting to just kind of like batten down the hatches and stay the course. And, it's like, nope, that's not how I do my discipline. And, it's comforting. It is. And, it's like, nope, that's not how I do my discipline. And, it's comforting. It is. And so we use that either food or absence of food as a way of reassuring ourselves of something. And then feeling completely safe within ourselves, usually we don't. Not if we're really honest about it. Because if you're eating in a way that can damage your health, or if you're engaging in behaviors that could put others, not only yourself, at risk, like, oh, my eating disorder had me doing things where my electrolytes were regularly out of balance and still I would be driving. That's not safe. When you do these things, it's like, I never really wanted to do that. And yet, even though I wasn't safe, and nobody in their right mind, except under love or war, would do some of the things that we do. It's irrational. It is. So this is part of step one, is kind of getting to grips with this idea that, even if we have a mild form, and I'm putting like air quotes around that, a mild form, and I'm putting like air quotes around that, a mild form of an eating disorder, as if there really was such a thing, you can't really trust yourself to do the next right thing, to take care of business without running off and doing behaviors, either abstaining from food that your body needs in order to be healthy, or engaging in behavior, abstaining from food that your body needs in order to be healthy, or engaging in behaviors that are going to take you no place good. So anyway, those are two of the things about this section from page 115 to 117 that I thought we should reflect on. So we did have these homework for last week, and I know that we have a bunch of folks on the call who are dialing in to act as panelists here for our STEP workshop panel on the two questions. It's like, how did your eating disorder make you feel powerless, and how did your lives become unmanageable, as part of this week's homework on page 3. So I don't know who all we have joining, but if you would be so kind as to unmute yourself with *6 or Alt-A if you're on a computer. We'll now go around the room, and we're not expecting that people who identify as sponsors to sponsor new people on this call. That's not the case at all. We just want everybody to sponsor new people on this call. That's not the case at all. We just want everybody to know that there really are sponsors in EDA, and that we're willing to help you out in the context of this workshop to help everybody understand how we help our sponsees through these steps. So I'm Annette. I'm in full recovery from bulimia, and I do sponsor. I'm Annette. I'm in full recovery from bulimia, and I do sponsor.
Hi, I'm Giselle. I'm in full recovery from my eating disorders, and I sponsor.
On the phone?
Hi, I'm Leslie.
Hi.
Hi, Elizabeth. Go ahead.
This is Leslie. I'm in New York, and I am in recovery from an eating disorder, and I sponsor.
Thank you, Leslie.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm recovered from an eating disorder, and I'm in Louisiana.
Hi, Michelle. Glad to have you on the call.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm in Phoenix, and I do sponsor, and I'm in recovery.
Hi, I'm Ellen, and I'm recovered from my eating disorders, and I'm calling from Texas, and I sponsor.
Thank you, Ellen.
My name is Amber. I'm in recovery from an eating disorder, and I am also from Texas.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and try to take these questions in turn. So In page 3, we were answering questions about powerlessness over our eating disorders. In what ways were we powerless, where we knew we were causing harm and could not seem to stop, no matter how hard we tried, no matter the possible consequences, and no matter how great the desire? So we'll have the panelists discuss that, and recognizing that powerlessness and unmanageability are actually distinct. So we were going to talk about that just a little bit. Nuria, if you're still on, would you care to share a little bit about powerlessness and how it distinguishes from unmanageability?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, just from unmanageability.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. Okay, so a lot of times powerlessness can cause unmanageability, but the powerlessness is not having the substantial power to stop the behaviors or to start what we should be doing to take care of ourselves. So trying to pinpoint times where we said, okay, that's enough. I'm going to stop this, or that's it. I need to start doing this, and was to cut it out. Okay. Unmanageability, with or without the eating disorder. Sometimes I put it like that, like, hey, my life could be unmanageable. Maybe I'm not taking care of bills. Maybe I'm not, very good in relationships. Maybe, I'm, spending money on high grocery bills when I shouldn't, or multiple gym memberships, things like that. Like, my life was pretty unmanageable. Now, the unmanageability in those respects actually pertained or were a result from the fact that I was powerless over my eating disorder. To look at like how we were powerless, how we could not control or stop the behaviors on our own, even when we wanted to.
So I'm going to ask to see if there's anybody that is a sponsor who wants to speak to ways in which they personally found that in which they typically find often sponsees report feeling powerless. Because we all struggle with this idea. It's like we're not really totally helpless in every aspect of life, are we? I mean, it isn't. So I have issues with, or I had 32 plus years ago, significant issues with alcoholism. 32 plus years ago, significant issues with alcoholism, and it flattened me. It's like I couldn't function. I was absolutely devastated. Just couldn't show up at work. Couldn't do the things that normal people do. But with an eating disorder, it was really a lot easier to hide. So I looked functional on the surface. So when I think about powerless, doesn't look at all like it did when I was like drinking myself to death. But I was every bit as ill, every bit, if not worse, actually, with the eating disorder. It was a far more like fundamental problem. When I'm thinking about other folks looking at this powerlessness problem, I get it not as like complete powerlessness over my life as a whole, or even powerlessness over food, because I could make or not make choices over food, but over the behaviors, over the thinking, over the obsession, over the way of relating to myself and other. That all just felt like out of control. It's like I felt like I couldn't make decisions about dealing with life that were reasonable. And so I resorted to my eating disorder continuously because it was better than, or felt easier than, like more comforting than doing other things. So I'm going to pass this over to, let's try Michelle in Louisiana. Let's try Michelle in Louisiana.
Hey, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I mean, I don't want to get like too, into the gory details. But I mean, like there's, like I had something that was really important to me, like to show up for a friend, like that's one of the more clear things, or, and I couldn't because, I set out in the morning that I was going to have a set of events. It was like dominoes clicking was in course, you know what I mean? And I was on my way. And even if I had gotten to a point where, I was wiped, and couldn't go forward with any more behaviors for the rest of the day, I still wouldn't show up for the friend. You know what I mean? Like I was still so in my place and myself and in that was kind of like part of the powerlessness that I experienced. And, you know, it's like, no matter what I did, and what I thought or what I read, it's like I was just trapped in behavior. It's like I was just trapped in behaviors, and I just couldn't get out of it. And in terms of the manageability, wait, we're just talking about powerlessness, right?
No, go ahead. We'll just talk.
All right.
They are distinct, but the consequences.
No, and I get that. It's like, you know, but like for me, like the unmanaged, it's like, you know, but like for me, like the unmanageability was like, you know, it was different from being caught in a pattern of behaviors in a particular day, where starting off my day thinking one thing and saying, you know, this is the way my life is going to, you know, this is the way my day is going to be, and not being able to actually make that happen because my behaviors had started, versus, you know, toward the end of it, you know, having roommates leave because I was stealing their food. And I was stealing their food because I had wrecked my car because I was eating in the car, because I was eating in the car. You know what I mean? It's like, you know what I mean? Like, this is stuff that isn't normal. And so I was having roommates leave. I was trying to figure out ways to play games with the ATM and money, and going to pawn shops because I couldn't afford food. And so like, that's the way my life was unmanageable. It was very different from in the middle of a snowstorm walking to a convenience store because, you know, I was in the middle of a binge and needed to, but they are related. Like, my life wouldn't be as unmanageable without the powerlessness that I was over my eating disorder at the same time.
Michelle, everyone in the room here is nodding, and yeah, we've all done this, I think, or at least big chunks of it. So thank you so much. We're going to have one other person share. I know to share. Let's just open it up.
This is Leslie in New York. I can share.
Please go ahead, Leslie. Thank you.
Thanks. So Leslie, recovering from an eating disorder, and I have been so, and I really love what I just heard from the last speaker, and just about both powerlessness and unmanageability. I remember when I was deep in it, I was an athlete competing, and my diet was an essential part of competition, and yet I could not stop myself in between competitions from buying that food and sitting down and eating it. And I remember once looking at one piece of food and saying, maybe this will be the thing that takes away the pain. And I realized, like, food doesn't do that. Like, it's just food, but yet I couldn't stop putting it into my mouth. And I was completely powerless over it. Not all the time. You know, there were times where I could kind of keep it under control, but then that would be followed by times where I really just could not. And it was exhausting, really exhausting. And in terms of unmanageability, the thing that I've realized now is I have 2 children, and they are so wanting to eat. Whereas before, you know, the healthy things and like the substitutions that I would make for like the bad foods, they didn't want to eat that. And then I'd get mad that they didn't eat it, and they were hangry. And, but now they actually, like, just now my daughter was like, my own personal food, and like enjoy the process of making it. But that's now. Anyway, back then I thought that I was doing the right thing, like being healthy with my kids and like making sure that they don't, you know, like childhood obesity and all that stuff. And it was really not, it was not kind. And now my living amends is so thanks.
That is so sweet. Thank you so much, Leslie. I really loved hearing that. So can we hear from, let's get Ellen in Texas. Hey, Ellen, are you there? Let's
Hi,
try.
I'm
Okay,
here.
sorry, go
I had
ahead.
started.
Sure. Go ahead.
I started talking and I was muted. Okay, sure. Yeah, it's good to be on the call this evening. I'm Ellen and recovered from. I'm Ellen and recovered from eating disorders. Yeah, I've been thinking about a couple different things. I was thinking about as far as like I was doing some writing today about powerlessness and just how driven I was in each of the different eating disorders. I could not participate in the eating disordered behavior, whatever that was. And, whether that was the anorexic behavior, the bulimic behavior, the overeating, I could just not do it. And then, I would, I'd often get up and I would think, this time is going to be the end of the day, the same behaviors I was participating in again. And as far as like the unmanageability, I was looking at that, I was in and out of hospitals a lot and had racked up a tremendous amount of debt as far as that goes because of, not taking care of myself. And, I had a lot of consequences because of my eating disorders, and it really made my life very unmanageable and not very livable, and I just am really grateful to not be in that place today. So anyway, those are just a couple of my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen. It's important for us to remember that no matter where we are in our eating disorder journey, that we always have things around which we can get better. So even though I haven't had an expression of an eating disorder in a long time to my life that are directly related to the way I think about myself, think about my life, think about my possibilities that I want to recover from, even if, it's not about food, I can have really weird ideas about my relationship, like with my husband, or, there's lots of areas in which I can get better. And so one of the things we had you do at the specific areas where you'd like to see some improvement in your life. And, one of the things that I wrote was just that I'd like to be able to stick to like a schedule that's disciplined and balanced, even when I'm feeling way out there. So sometimes things happen in life and you're just kind of, even though I really believe in that legs of the chair thing, there's areas in which I still feel like I'm powerless. There's areas in which I still feel like I'm powerless. I'm not making great decisions. I'm like showing up, but oh my gosh. And so when I get there, I always go back to step one because I need to, it's not about food, but it is about how I'm relating to the rest of my life and whether I'm taking charge and recognizing that I'm really driving the bus and I'm not really and whether I'm taking charge and recognizing that I'm really driving the bus and I'm not really just being dragged behind the bus, because that's what it feels like when I'm like way out there. I feel like I'm just being dragged along. Anyway, okay, so with that, I'm wondering, do we feel like we're ready to take step one? I mean, to me, if you are not yet ready to take step one, please give this some more thought. Honestly, what we're doing here is outlining the areas in which we're feeling kind of stuck. It's not that we're powerless around everything. It's kind of like we're a car stuck in the sand. It's not like we're without power or the car is without power, but we don't have sufficient power. So that's all we're really doing with step one, is we're admitting that we're kind of stuck in a trap. How are people feeling? Do we feel like we're ready to take this step?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Yeah. I said it with more words. I said it with more words. So somebody in the room asked me to repeat what it was. Okay. So we're not saying that we're without any power. We're not saying that, that we're really fundamentally powerless. We're saying that we're caught in a trap, that we're stuck in what we're doing and we're ready to start something new. So that's really what we're doing with step one, is we're saying we're doing and we're ready to start something new. So that's really what we're doing with step one, is we're saying, look, this isn't working. I need to start something new. I'm willing to table my old ideas of thinking, ways of thinking about this problem, and I'm willing to try something new. And I've heard from people on the call, sounds like most people are ready to take this step. So we're now going to be admitted we were powerless
over eating disorders.
That our lives had become
unmanageable.
Woohoo! We took it.
Woohoo.
Yay. Step one.
Yay.
Now, the rest of the steps are all about delivering the power that you need to build a stable. The next section is entitled, There is a Solution. And I've asked Nuria, and Kale, are you on the call? Checking for Kale. Okay, so Nuria, I'm going to ask you to carry it. And actually, if you have somebody that you'd care to call upon who might be able to also, share on There is a Solution, I'd love to hear from you both.
Okay, can you hear?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. I was banking on Kale being on here. Okay, so yes, there's a solution chapter. Obviously, like there is hope. Like we're powerless, but we're not helpless. We're powerless of our eating disorders, but it doesn't mean we can't get better. We just need to find another way that actually works this time. And, there's a solution. It kind of, on page 71, it reminds us on the second full paragraph, the good news is that no matter how sordid and miserable your story, how mild or severe your symptoms, we have been there. So it doesn't matter, because we have to be careful not to fall into the comparing and what we were supposed to be identifying with each other and what we can relate to, because it doesn't matter, and even though in the chapter levels of severity, like bottom line at the end, it doesn't matter. Like if you've had enough and you want to get better, we know a way that works for everyone, no matter how far, no matter how bad it got in our minds or outside. Like it doesn't matter. Like if you have had enough, there's a way out. On page 74, hitting or rolling around on the bottom, and for some of us, it's not like we hit it wasn't like one specific thing that like was like, oh, I'm powerless and I now I want to get better. It was like we rolled around and now I want to get better. It was like we rolled around. For me, it was like, it took me a while. It was like, okay, well, maybe I am, maybe I'm not, maybe it's not so bad. And, there are parts in the chapter, and I have them like all asterisks. There's a little asterisk right next to it, on 75. And it does help in case anyone is having a hard time coming up with, finding examples of powerlessness. It comes into like different solutions in of themselves that haven't helped, that we try to do certain things to recover or to get better or to experience some release, and like they either didn't work or like they worked only temporarily and we were back. Willpower wasn't enough. Self-restraint, discipline, all this is on page 75. I manage my food better, my body that maybe I could act out from time to time. And then I got to times where I really, really wanted to just stop, 100% stop. And the desire to stop, you know, it's a little italicized, like a desire wasn't enough. And it's like, yes, obviously that's part of the solution, like isn't enough. And it's like, yes, obviously that's part of the solution. Like, obviously for me to for me to recover from my eating disorder, like I gotta want to get better, you know, and how am I going to get better? I'm going to work these steps. But before working the steps, I had a desire at some point and I wanted to get better, but that in its desire at some point, and I wanted to get better, but that in itself, by itself alone, was not enough for me to recover from my eating disorder. But it's definitely, it was part of me wanting to get better. Health problems, you know, I thought, oh, if a doctor ever told me I shouldn't do certain behaviors that I was doing, I would stop. And lo and behold, a doctor told me that if I did a certain thing, I could die from it. And I thought, okay, well, here it is. This is going to be the answer for me. This is what's going to make me stop. Like, this is going to be the solution to, you know, getting me to stop. Like, it wasn't enough. So no matter what the consequence I experienced, it was never enough. It was never the solution in themselves. You know, and luckily, you know, on page 78, we really get into the way out. Like there is a path and it hasn't worked. That's okay. Like here's, you know, connecting the step 1 to step 2, like, yes, we can be restored to sanity. Yes, we can get better. We've got to have this hope to, you know, that this is going to work. You know, and so on page 79 at the bottom, it says, day by day, as newcomers in EDA find their eating disorders weakening, the stranglehold gradually loosens. You know, because here's the thing is I had different manifestations of eating disorders, and you know, as I came in, like one manifestation went down, but then like I was having a difficult time with the next one. And then that one, like I was having a difficult time with the next one. And then that one went down as I went in. And then it was like, oh my gosh, here we go, third time. But when and there was at some point where I thought, gosh, I don't know if I'm getting better. Like I still have an eating disorder, but I had to look at the truth because the eating disorder was weakening. You know, it didn't have a hold of, you know, it didn't have a hold of my life. My life didn't evolve all around it anymore. And I was getting better and I was getting healthier. And there was more to my life than just my eating disorder. So I had to realize that working these steps was definitely the way out from my eating disorder, but also to a way out of the misery and into, I like to say, out of the darkness and into the light. So, yeah, and then it goes on to how to use this book specifically in case there's any more questions.
Thank you.
On the call?
Giselle, do you want to share? Or how are we doing here? I was going to do this. Okay, so we're going to, Giselle's going to share on something else. So I just wanted to point out this hitting or rolling around on the bottom. I always thought that, you know, if I just hit bottom, if it ever got bad enough, I'd have the desire to stop. It's like I figured a desire to stop would get that bad because it seemed like I had some ability to control it. I could keep it from getting so bad that I like couldn't take care of my children. I mean, CPS was not going to take away my kids, so I was not going to do things that were that bad, you know. But I was perfectly fine doing all kinds of dangerous, health damaging things that were felt. So it was terrible, and yet I was never going to hit that bottom, and I knew I wasn't. So I just was despairing of ever changing, and it seemed like no matter what I did, I felt like I didn't belong. I never felt like I was all right. And it felt like no matter how much I acted out, I still never really felt, literally, I never felt like I was enough. And that was a key part of the problem that working the steps of EDA solved. Other programs didn't solve that problem, that not enough problem. But this one did. And we'll talk about that in the coming weeks. So one of the other things that occurred to me is that, the more we practice our behaviors, the more we need them. And the more we practice recovery, the more we learn to rely on it. And it's not like that reliance is automatic. That trust is built from that durable pattern of reliance. Trust is built from that durable pattern of reliance. It is not something that's an overnight thing. It comes from the little incremental things. And we don't always realize that. It's like it's hard for us to have faith in that, that these incremental little changes will actually build to something that is bigger and more stronger than our eating disorders ever were. But it works. It just takes a lot of patience. And the patience is actually encouraged by coming to these meetings. It's coming and being honest with people and having them look you in the eye and going like, yeah, you're okay. I was just like that. And it got better. And it does get better. Talk about working the steps day by day and, that our recovery grows with increasing reliance. Well, that reliance is not an easy thing, but we have to start with things we trust. So we're eager to trust things that work for other people sometimes, but they don't always work for us. Some things that do work actually don't always work for us. Some things that do work actually are, the solutions include, and this is listed on page 211, but it's listed all throughout our stories. Some things that work are acceptance of ourselves and our truths exactly as we are. Gratitude for all that's good, right, positive, and whole. Now, does that come naturally when we are? Gratitude for all that's good, right, positive, and whole. Now, does that come naturally when we're in our eating disorders? It's like, hell no. I mean, it just doesn't. It's like thinking about positive things that used to make me want to retch. I mean, people would tell me that, and it's just like Giselle's license plate, I just want to puke. I'm like, no, make it go away. License plate was like to take small risks to build trust with ourselves, others, and God, higher power, or higher purpose. Growing reliance on whatever it is we truly believe that can bring us peace and perspective. I mean, people start meditative practices and then give up because they're frustratingly ineffective. Well, you know what? It's like the more you practice something, the better you get at it sometimes, and it probably will work, and I don't care what it is. Love and service. Okay, that's another thing. It's like we do sometimes in our eating disorders a lot of service because it feels like, okay, well, if I just put others in front of me, I'll get better. And unfortunately, that's not entirely true. We actually have to take care of our own needs. And unfortunately, that's not entirely true. We actually have to take care of our own needs first. We have to put the oxygen mask on ourselves and on the airplane things where they make you go through those videos, through the walking through whatever it is, the safety talk. And you have to take care of your basic needs first, or you really can't be there for others. You can pretend to, you can go through the motions, but it doesn't feel as authentic, and parts of you are going to resent it. So love and service to God, higher power, and higher purpose do work, but we have to do our part and help themselves. That's for real, guys. I mean, it's like we do have to help ourselves first. Okay, so chapter 3, more about eating disorders. And nobody actually ever wants to come into this thing with that label. I mean, honestly, it's like anorexia might be like some kind of like a badge of honor for some folks. Illness, nobody wants to be labeled mentally ill, do we? I know that most don't. And so we outline some specific criteria for anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder. And then there's this new diagnosis of other specified feeding and eating disorders. But the main point here that we want to bring home to people is it's like you might not meet the clinical criteria for having an eating disorder and still be entirely miserable and still be entirely unable to make much further progress with life because you haven't built trust with yourself to get through things without relying on either abstaining from food when you shouldn't or indulging in things in ways damaging. And you don't have to is the thing, but you do have to until you don't, just like Dr. Lucretia Hall said in her doctor's opinion. So one of the key things that we talked about at the beginning of this evening was that strange mental blank spot. And we have some examples in here starting on page 90. Of Michelle. Now I knew Michelle. Honestly, she was doing real well in another 12-step program, working the steps. She had a sponsor. She called the sponsor regularly. She had she called the sponsor regularly. She had pretty decent home life. Loving husband. Husband worked and she stayed at home with the kids, and not a whole lot of like financial stress or other things were going on. But she was getting some traction with her 12-step program, and then something just went in this section we quoted her. So what happened is these neighbor kids came over, and it was a very innocuous kind of situation. They often came over and joined the family for dinner. Well, in this particular case, that something went weird after everybody went home. So it was kind of like at the dinner table, ew, like what the heck, it's like, okay. So, but as Michelle was putting all the stuff away, she started like nibbling on extra stuff like veggies. Okay, well, why? Yeah, we don't want that to go to waste. But then like the veggies led to the pantry, then the pantry led to the fridge. And, it's like, honestly, it was like, and the shame followed the cycle. And it's like, she couldn't figure out, well, what the heck was going on? It's like, we talk about that in the AA text too. It's like, the guy that, decided to have milk at a bar, and then he thought, well, one jigger wouldn't hurt him. And it's like, same kind of thing, mental blank spot. Spots are really fundamentally insane. But if you peel back the layers, and Michelle actually went to some trouble, and she told us later, okay, so what really happened there? Actually, there was a lot. She was feeling totally overwhelmed. She was feeling like, okay, those neighbor kids belonged to a family that was splitting up. And she felt like it was going to fall to her to start taking care of her kids belonged to a family that was splitting up. And she felt like it was going to fall to her to start taking care of those kids. And nobody had asked her to start taking care of those kids, but she made it all about her. It wasn't really about, their situation. It was really about that she was going to be like saddled with this responsibility that she didn't feel like she was going to be able to take on. But, she was trying to think of the poor children, right? So what happened there? She lost all perspective, and she didn't even know it. Okay. How many times has that happened to you? Like, happens to me a lot. There's crap that comes up. I'm like, what's this? Recognize that stuff and to deal with it effectively right up. Because what should she have done? Well, she could have done a lot of different things. She could have gone straight to, comfort the kids, talk to her husband, talk to the neighbors to see what could be done to provide appropriate services that wouldn't have been about her. But instead she didn't. So that was one example. It's like, it isn't really enough. So that strange mental blank spot comes up for people with eating disorders as much as it does for other folks. I know we're running short on time here. So we're going to, is there anybody else that wants to share anything on chapter 3? Because we also talked about Marla, the example of Marla. Self-knowledge is not enough. It's a jaywalking story, sure enough. Well, go ahead.
Oh, so if this is Giselle, if you came from AA, you know this story. It's the jaywalking story about this guy. No big deal. He was just going to run out in traffic, and he did it all the time, and people just thought he was crazy, just kind of dumb, and just kind of laughed crazy, just kind of dumb, and just kind of laughed him off. And then he was doing great, never got ran over, never got hit. And then one day he got hit. Oh, I got hurt a little bit. People started kind of telling him, maybe you shouldn't jump right out in traffic. Maybe you shouldn't, walk out there. You're going to get hurt. He's like, nah, nothing. It's walk out there. You're going to get hurt. He's like, nah, nothing. It's all right. It's all right. That didn't hurt much. And, later on he gets hit again and gets hurt more, and he's just, the cycle goes over and over again, and then he gets hurt bad, and finally you got to stop this, and they try an intervention, and it's just like in AA with the alcohol. It's like, just come in for a family intervention and knock this stuff off. And I think of that in the same way as my eating disorders. People would tell, if I let them in, but this is a very secretive thing. This is destroying you. This is hurting you. You could die. Well, yeah, okay, but I'm already in it. I knew I was going to die on the toilet, and that was going to be me, and that was, I guess, okay with me, which is insane, which is this disease. So yeah, I had this. So yeah, I had one thing I wanted to share back when we were talking about personal experiences, and it came to my brain of the insanity. And I've shared it with Annette, and I've shared it with a couple people. When I was pregnant, my daughter is perfectly okay. A couple people. When I was pregnant, my daughter is perfectly okay. But when I was pregnant, I had that insanity, and nothing, not even her could get me to stop. I stopped drinking. I stopped smoking, because that's the thing you should do as a parent. You know, you're pregnant, stop the eating disorder. And so I would eat for myself and then do what bulimics do. And then I would eat for her. And I kept that up through the pregnancy. And that was just insane. I thought of that insanity, and I don't have to live in that insanity. And that's the foundation. And that's where these steps can take us, is to bring us out of that insanity and to give us the tools. And I just think this is an amazing opportunity.
Thank you, Giselle. Do we have anybody else that would care to share about chapter 3? Also would care to share about chapter 3?
Hi, this is Emily.
Go ahead, Emily.
I love everything that was just shared. I also wanted, because I love the jaywalking story. It's very relatable. Very relatable. And one thing that I wanted to touch on is that at some point in the jaywalking story, the jaywalker is promising people, those around him, that he's going to stop. And I think it's implied that they want to stop. It's implied that they want to stop, that they're getting freaked out. They might die. And then, but they nevertheless, out they go into traffic, and then they're in traction. And I can relate that very much to my eating disorder, because at first it was like, hey, can you gain some weight for me? Emily, because that's my name. Sorry, I'm Emily. And it was like, no, stubborn, you're just jealous, etc. But as the time went past, it grew more intense. And it wasn't just other people who wanted me to stop anymore. I didn't want to be running out into traffic anymore, but I was still doing it. So it's kind of like this, crazy experience of riding my bike to go buy food for a binge and crying because I don't want to be. Because I think that's really when I started to feel scared and powerless, was when I realized it's not about whether or not I want to stop. And I thought it was. It was about finding something greater to help me to stop and reaching out for help. But that took a long time after realizing.
Thank you, Emily. That was really powerful. So at the top of page 97, it says, "We hope our stories bring home to you that we of the hopeless variety, the people who are genuinely powerless, we're absolutely unable to stop engaging in our eating disordered behaviors on the basis of need, on the basis of desire, self-defense, but when caught off guard, we were reduced to human wreckage with astonishing rapidity. Despite having fully functioning intellectual capabilities, a reasonably well-developed amount of common sense, and ample motivation to want to remain fully engaged in life, we were prone to being caught off guard." And that was kind of the point where, I got willing to do almost anything, because I had been willing to do almost anything, and I had been trying almost anything for, it seemed like, a decade, really. But I wasn't making much headway. Well, there is a solution. That's what it tells us on page 97. And the truth is, there are answers to the strange mental blank spots. They mention it in the AA text, and it's not that different in EDA. What it really entails is that our defense against those strange mental blank spots must come from reliance on God, on a higher power, or from our daily commitment and surrender to a higher purpose, each of which provides perspective power, or from our daily commitment and surrender to a higher purpose, each of which provides perspective and opportunities to turn even the most troubling emotions into a form of energy we can use to make our lives better, or make life better for others. We repeat, the proposal is simple but not easy. We have to willingly give up our old relationship to life and our place in it, and we have to take specific actions that humble us and restore us to sanity every day. Now, is that something that, I don't really think a whole lot about it. I mean, I do my 10th step, I do my 11th step, I do 12-step work all the time, but it's like it's become a way of life, and it's easy. I don't really have to think like it's all like, as Giselle likes to say, bubblegum and rainbows, and the answer is no, it isn't. There's a lot of hard stuff that happens, but I don't feel insufficient to it. I do recognize that, like, I'm driving the bus instead of being dragged behind it. That's kind of different. It isn't the way it felt when I was in my eating disorder. The way it felt when I was in my eating disorder. I felt like I was being dragged behind by my eating disorder, that it really did have, it had the answers for me, and I was helpless in its grip until I figured out better ways that worked better to meet my needs. Some of that was about recognizing and accepting that the emotions I had were important, and some of that was about recognizing and accepting that the emotions I had were important and good, because I didn't feel like that at all. So we're going to have more time for questions and answers in our next session. I do hope everybody is able to dial back in for next week when we're really going to start working on step 2. Step 2 is like really the proving ground. You can admit powerlessness. I admitted powerlessness every single freaking day in my eating disorder for like at least a decade. And I didn't get better for long periods of time. Why? Because I was frustrated with these, simple little incremental steps that it took to engage in that process. It took perspective, and I didn't get perspective from trying to rely on things I didn't trust. Step 2 is really all about building trust. So the work that we do in EDA to kind of build the foundation is super important. If you're atheist or agnostic, this faith, who can't seem to get traction on their eating disorder, you are not alone. If you are somebody that has, kind of ambivalent feelings around this whole spiritual thing, but you really think that that might hold the solution, you are not alone. So if you are still somebody that has had success with an eating disorder, and now all of a sudden you're back in old behaviors, you are not alone. Okay, this is a thing that there is good, solid, full recovery, but it takes a long and sort of sometimes arduous work to develop perspective and peace that is durable. So with that thought, we're going to turn and talk a little bit about next week's homework. So we're going to be reading Chapter 4, We Agnostics, Atheists, and Believers, pages 199, not nearly as much reading as last time. So pages 99 to 109, and Chapter 5, Step 2, which is pages 1. So pages 99 to 109, and Chapter 5, Step 2, which is pages 117 to 124. And we're going to work on worksheet page 4. So I know we're at time, and I want to bring to your attention that the person who's offered up her home, current location for our STEP workshop here in Scottsdale, is currently in the hospital. She needs your thoughts and prayers. If you are able to, we would love to have you either text her or write a quick note to info@eatingdisordersanonymous.org, and I would be really happy to pass those on for text out, and if you ask and send me a note on the chat window, I will be happy to give you that text. I don't really just want to have it on the recording for posterity so that people can continue to send her notes forever, but I would really appreciate it if you would send us at least, something that just lets her know that she's thought and cared about, because she's given her heart and her home to our recovery. So thank you very much to Rachel C. in Scottsdale. All right, with that, thank you everybody for dialing in. I really am enjoying these sessions. I hope you are too. Thank you everybody for dialing in. I really am enjoying these sessions. I hope you are too. And I'll look forward to speaking with you again real soon. So with that, we will pass the 7th tradition here in the room. You can get to the 7th tradition support EDA tab on the EDA website at www.4eda.org. There's a support tab where you can click on a PayPal link, and then we'll close with Anuria, you want to pick a prayer for us? Okay, in the absence of that, here we go. Everybody ready?
Ready.
All right. *6 to unmute.
*6?
Okay. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can. Hallelujah, everybody. Keep coming back. It works if you work it, and you're worth it.
Worth it.
Yay. Thank
you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very
so
much.
much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great week.
Bye.